Welcome to this video on the Contax RTS3 camera. The Contax RTS3 was a semi-automatic exposure camera using aperture and shutter speed priority modes with manual override aimed at the professional market. It is a manual focus camera that has centre weighted and spot metering. It takes lenses of the Contax Yashica line made by Carl Zeiss, Yashica and other manufacturers. The RTS3 replaced the Contax RTS2 and was the last of the Contax RTS series of cameras. Introduced in 1990, the camera has a built-in motor drive for film advance and rewind. The film speed range is 6 to 6400 ASA in 1/3 of a stop increments, and also there is DX coding support over the range 25 to 5000 ASA. Metering is centre weighted or spot metering. The range of shutter speeds is from 4 seconds to 1/8000th of a second in manual and shutter speed priority modes, and from 32 seconds to 1/8000th of a second in aperture priority mode. The shutter speeds are quartz controls and stepless. Shutter flash sync is 1/250th of a second. An electronic cable release can be attached to a custom socket. There is also a depth of field preview button and a mirror lock. Multiple exposures are supported. Interchangeable focusing screens are available on this camera. Exposure compensation of plus or minus 2 stops is available in 1/3 of a stop increments. TTL flash with contact flash units is supported. Automatic exposure bracketing is available up to plus or minus 1 stop in half stop increments. Unfortunately, there is a common issue with the electronics of this camera. The main controls on the Contax RTS3 are the on-off switch, which also incorporates the AE lock and shutter release. The display panel with exposure counter and battery state. The drive mode wheel. The TTL pre-flash metering lever. The combined film speed dial and exposure compensation control. The ABC mode lever. The flash hot shoe with TTL connector pins. The diopter adjustment wheel. The shutter speed dial. The shutter speed dial release button on top of the dial. The camera mode selector lever. On the back of the camera are the viewfinder cover, the eyepiece shutter, the data back controls, the data back battery compartment, the cable release socket, the camera mode lever release button. On the front of the camera are the lens release at the top of the lens mount. This also incorporates the mirror lock lever. Electronic self-timer LED in the grip. The exposure check button. On the right of the camera are the film rewind lever, the vertical shutter release and its lock. The B mode manual cable release socket. PC sync port. The depth of field preview button incorporating the metering mode switch. The film backdoor release catch. On the bottom of the camera are a tripod socket and a battery compartment cover release lock. The battery compartment takes a single 2CR5 battery or 6 AA batteries. The main power switch has the shutter release in the middle of it. Power switch goes from off to on to AEL for auto exposure lock, which saves the current metered exposure value. The shutter speed is set by rotating the shutter speed wheel. There are two X-sync speeds marked on the dial, one 250th and 125th of a second. If the dial is set to 125th of a second X mode, the shutter speed dial release on the top of the dial must be pressed down to release the dial. The film speed is set manually by lifting up the film speed ring and rotating the film speed ring to show the desired film speed. The film speed ring is then dropped back down. DX support is selected by setting the film speed ring to the DX setting. In automatic mode, exposure compensation is set by rotating the film speed dial. Compensation ranges plus or minus 2 stops in 1/3 of a stop increments. To rewind the film, press the rewind release on the right hand side of the camera. The camera supports 4 different camera modes. AV or aperture priority, where the aperture is set on the lens and the camera sets the appropriate shutter speed. TV mode or shutter speed priority, where the shutter speed is set on the shutter speed dial and the aperture set to the minimum value using an lens, and the camera sets the appropriate lens aperture. This mode only works with lenses which have the minimum aperture marked in green to match the green of the TV on the mode dial. M for manual exposure mode, where you set both the aperture and the shutter speed manually, and B for longer exposures. The drive mode dial enables you to select single frame advance, low 3 frames per second or high 5 frames per second speed continuous advance, or multiple exposure mode. The camera also has an electronic self-timer supporting either 2-second or 10-second delay. The desired mode is selected by lifting up the mode dial and rotating it to the desired setting and releasing the dial back down. The mirror lock lever is used to lock the mirror up. The AE lock is typically used before locking up the mirror. The diopter value can be adjusted using the diopter wheel on the top of the camera. A contact screw and round diopter lens can be mounted in the viewfinder cover, replacing the securing ring to facilitate a greater adjustment range. The ABC mode enables a series of 3 exposures to be taken, one at the set exposure value and one each above and below the metered value by the exposure bracket value. The bracket is set using the dial. 3 frames at 0.5 stops bracket. 3 frames at 1 stop bracket. The cable release socket is used to connect a Contax cable release and other compatible accessories. The Contax RTS 3 uses the Contax cable release S or cable release L type cable releases. The eyepiece shutter is activated by lifting the lever. The camera is equipped with a real-time vacuum system that sucks the film flat for optimum sharpness. It is a pucker film sucker. It works in all camera modes except B. A special ceramic film plate was developed for optimal flatness, with the RTV system behind it. The slits in the plate are for the RTV system. Here is an illustration from the brochure showing the effect of the RTV on film flatness. The RTV system is engaged before the shutter is fired and released once the shutter has closed. This was a first in a 35mm SLR, and may be the only time it was used. The brochure cites an example, a rear focus displacement of 1 cm for a subject distance of 3 meters using an 85mm f1.4 lens. Film's flatness was more of an issue with very fast lenses used fully open. The data pack can be used to print date and time information in the space between frames on the film. The settings are specified using the buttons on the back. There is a PC sync port for use with a flash that doesn't use a hot shoe. You have to ensure the shutter speed is 1/250th of a second or lower. The pre-flash lever is used to enable pre-flash spot metering. This lever is used to fire the flash without taking a picture, and the spot meter flash exposure error from the correct exposure is displayed in the viewfinder. The camera supports TTL flash metering with Contax flashes. The RTS3 is compatible with later Contax flashes in TTL mode, although it will not support all of the features of the TLO360, although second curtain sync is supported. A flash can be connected either using the PC sync port or the hot shoe. TTL flash only works via the hot shoe connector. In automatic mode with a Contax flash attached that supports TTL metering, the camera automatically switches to 1/250th of a second flash sync speed. Sometimes a lower flash sync speed is selected, depending on the camera mode. The camera supports TTL pre-flash spot metering. This involves first firing the flash without taking a picture, and the spot metered flash exposure error from the correct exposure is displayed in the viewfinder. This can then be used to adjust the aperture to give the correct flash exposure, and the photo then taken. This works with non-Contax flashes as well as with Contax flashes. This is a feature mainly used in studio work. The viewfinder illustration from the brochure is shown here. The viewfinder displays the shutter speed with over and under exposure indications. The aperture value currently set on the lens is displayed. The camera mode is displayed along with the metering mode. There is also an indication of when exposure compensation is in use, and a flash ready indication which also doubles as a flash confidence indication. The results of pre-flash metering are also shown. The exposure count is also displayed. The Contax RTS3 replaced the RTS2 and is a lot more electronic. It was described by Contax in its brochure as a Stradivarius for photographic professionals. It introduced pre-flash spot metering and spot metering to the RTS line. Unlike the early RTS cameras, there is a half press on the shutter release to activate the viewfinder display. The viewfinder gives consistent focusing with an f1.4 lens from near and far, and virtually 100% coverage. The RTS3 uses a vertical run shutter with a maximum shutter speed of 1/8000th of a second. The main innovation on the RTS3 was the RTV system, designed to increase film flatness, which size determined can be quite bad, particularly on the first frame to be shot with the camera if the film has been left in it for a while. This can affect image quality, particularly with fast lenses. An especially flat ceramic pressure plate for the film was also adopted to assist this. Quite how much this worked in practice is open to debate, as I suspect it would tend to require the camera on a tripod and perfectly focused with the mirror locked up and using a cable release, which rules out quite a few styles of photography. Basically, it is a studio camera. The RTV system was one of Contax's quirky engineering solutions designed to yield the absolutely best quality, possibly past the point of any common sense, which was one of their endearing qualities. After all, you cannot have some pesky film undulations making those Carl Zeiss lenses look bad. The camera is unusual in taking multiple different types of batteries. 6 AA batteries can be used, or a 2CR5 battery. The 2CR5 is not recommended for use in cold weather, and I have had an RTS3 stop working on me in cold weather when using a TCR5 battery. Rechargeable AA batteries are supported and are recommended for use in cold weather. The Contax RTS3 supports a magnifier or right angle finder being fitted on the viewfinder. 5 different focusing screens are available. It can be used with the Auto Macro Bellows PC. The camera has a built-in winder and a wide range of accessories connect to the cable release socket, including infrared controllers and radio controllers. The RTS3 is probably the least reliable of the RTS series. I would not recommend buying one, as there is a common problem with the viewfinder display failing, which seriously degrades the camera's usability. There appears to be no viable repair option for this.